Hello. My name is Micah Taylor, and I'm an engineer with Boone County Resource Management. Just a little autobiography of myself. I've lived in...
Use this, Micah. This room swallows sound.
You just talk into it like this.
Maybe I'll just try and speak
Okay.
a little louder.
All right.
You're going to have to.
Okay. A little bit about myself. I've lived in Columbia roughly 15 years. I grew up born and raised in a town in northwest Missouri called Maryville. I came down here to go to college, and I graduated in civil engineering. After college, I worked for the city of Jefferson down in Jefferson City for about 5 years, and I'm about ready to wrap up my 5th year with the county. As far as projects go, this rehab project is roughly my 4th project like this. There's 4 engineers in the county, and my duty is basically design engineer, so I design projects like this. Topics I'm going to talk about are what is a rehab project, why are we doing a rehab project now, how will it be done, impacts on the neighborhood, project timeline, and I'll have time for questions. Pam submitted some questions to me earlier. I'll go through some of those, and then we can touch base on just general questions you have. A little disclaimer I have down here is that the project is still under design. Most of this information is good, it's fine, but there might still be some last minute tweaks. So just to kind of keep that in mind. But like I said, I would say a good 90–95% of this information will hold. What is a street rehab project? Street rehab is basically the complete removal and replacement of the existing street. We're basically taking the old street and making it new again. So I know these pictures might be a little hard to see. So this is a rehab project we did last year. As you can see, probably looks pretty familiar. Got some panels that are failing, some ones that are probably original, and we basically come in and do a whole new street. Minus curb and gutter, but I'll get to that in a second. Why rehab now? I'll kind of let Charles Barkley answer that question. Basically, the road is not in good shape. And we kind of know this, but how bad a shape is it in? The way there's about 30 miles of concrete street that the county maintains. And of those 30 miles, we have mapped out those streets to the panel, which is roughly, anywhere there's a joint. So that's roughly, a 10×10, 10×20 section of road. So I know this picture's not very clear, but every other year we go out and inspect every single panel. And we give those panels a rating. It's either good, meaning that there's really nothing wrong with it, there might be some minor wear to it, or it gets labeled damaged, which means it's got a crack in it, there might be some wear to it, it's just not in pristine condition. And then you'll have panels that will label as replace. So multiple cracks, it's starting to settle, it's kind of losing its structural capacity. So looking at El Chaparral as a whole, we have 40% of the panels are labeled damaged and 12% need to be replaced. So when we look at subdivisions like this, how we decide if we're just going to do spot repair versus complete rehab kind of depends on these numbers. But sometimes the numbers don't tell the whole story. Again, I don't know if you can see kind of this area, but when you start getting groups of panels that are replaced, that are surrounded by damaged ones, obviously we're not going to go in and just replace the to-be replaced panels when they're surrounded by damage. So when it gets kind of up in those numbers, it's more cost beneficial to pretty much just start from scratch. And so that's kind of what we're looking at in El Chaparral. And really, those numbers would be higher if it weren't for past work that we've done in the neighborhood. Again, I'm sorry that the picture is a little out of focus, but Sonora Drive is in pretty good condition. How will the project be built? This project does include the entire subdivision minus Rosetta and this loop of Santa Ana. So everything in pink is what we're going to rehab. The project will be built in phases to kind of help mitigate issues with inconvenience. Our goal is to have a drivable surface at the end of the day. So when we rip out the pavement, hopefully we'll be coming right behind that and putting in some rock or some sort of drivable surface. What's really going to mess with that is our lovely Missouri weather. As you guys know, and actually I think it happened just yesterday, you guys could get a downpour right in this neighborhood and downtown will get nothing. So sometimes this drivable surface might get affected by pop-up showers, but that is the goal that we're trying to shoot for, to have basically a means that at the end of the day you can get as close to your house as possible.
So what will you do about the dip and all of us that live behind the dip when you're doing that?
I will get to that in a
Okay.
second. Phases will start in the south. We'll start in the south and we will work our way to WW. Basically the idea behind that is this project is going to require a lot of heavy trucks. Hauling material in, hauling material out, so it doesn't make much sense to build a road just to have it run over by a bunch of heavy trucks. So we tend to start in the back and work our way out. The project will be bid with two different options. I put may change because when I wrote this slide, I was waiting on some test results for option 2. And we've since gotten those, but I haven't really digested them yet. So as of now, there's still two options on the table, and I think we'll keep the two options. So one option is what we call a geotextile reinforced base with an asphalt pavement, and option 2 is a chemically stabilized subgrade with an asphalt pavement. And I'll explain how those are done. So first is the geotextile reinforced base, and I'll go through the steps. So first step is, I mentioned earlier that we're trying to keep as much curb and gutter in place as we can, but we will be making spot repairs on, some of you may have actually seen me walking around the neighborhood. So I walk through the entire neighborhood and I make a judgment. Is that worth replacing? And then I mark all those up, and that's usually the first step of a rehab project, is to come in and make these repairs. And then after that comes kind of the real destructive part, removing the pavement and starting excavation of the underlying soil. You can kind of see that in action right here. Next, we lay a high-strength geotextile fabric like this, and we start bringing in base rock. We bring that to grade and compact it, and it basically kind of looks like a gravel road. And this is what we would call a drivable surface. Again, it's pretty much a gravel road. We have 400 some odd miles of gravel road in the county, so I mean that's essentially kind of what you might be driving on for a short time. And then after that base is in place, we start asphalt. Asphalt is installed in layers. We call those lifts. Typically, there's 3 total lifts. We have to limit the thickness of a lift just so we can get compaction on it. The max is about 4 inches. The design calls for roughly 8 inches on this option. So we'll do probably a 3, 3, and 2, or 3, 3.5, and 1.5. And once the surface is done, we're pretty much done. The surface lifts we will probably hold back on, and we try and do as big an area in one operation as we can. The reason we do that is to limit the amount of joints that are in that surface. The less joints you have, the less water intrusion you'll have, the better your road will perform. Option 2 is a chemically stabilized subgrade. And this is something that we've kind of wanted to try, but we've usually been limited because our typical projects really aren't that large. And this is kind of more conducive to a larger project. And so the steps of chemically stabilized is, again, start with curb and gutter spot repairs, and then concrete pavement removal. This picture right here I included because with this option there is a possibility that a contractor, his goal is going to be, I need to remove as much concrete pavement in as short time as possible. So this machine is a rubbleizing machine, and it drives along in this boot right here, strikes the pavement several times a second, and basically turns the concrete road into a gravel section. If this is done, this might be the drivable surface for a while until that layer is removed and they stabilize the subgrade. The way this subgrade gets stabilized is we might have to bring in a little bit of additional rock, because once we compact this layer that we stabilize, it'll get compacted down, so we need a little bit of material so we reach our final elevation. So we might need to bring in a little bit of rock. And then the chemical we use to stabilize, or one of the chemicals you can use to stabilize, is called lime kiln dust. It's a byproduct of the lime manufacturing process. It dries out the soil and kind of impacts a type of cement bond. It's not as strong as cement, but it's like cement. And so that gets delivered in a spreader truck like this. It is a fine dust, so there are trucks out there, and I've spec'd the truck in the project. There are trucks that have a mounted vacuum circulation system to try and keep that dust down. Given that this is a residential neighborhood, we're going to try really hard to keep that dust down. So I expect that these trucks should be equipped with that type of machinery. Once the lime kiln dust is spread, a machine similar to this comes in and mixes the chemical into the soil. Right here is a large drum like this that's full of teeth. That drum spins, mixes the soil. There's a couple different versions of a stabilizing machine like this. This is a self-propelled one. You can get basically the brains of the machine, the spinning drum, as a standalone thing that gets pulled by a tractor, or a standalone attachment that gets attached to a different piece of construction equipment. And so this machine will go along, mix up the soil, and then it has a hose that attaches to a water truck, adds water to the lime kiln dust, activates it, and then right behind the machine is a compactor that compacts the soil down. Once that's compacted, it'll cure for 5 to 7 days. But local traffic should be able to get on the soil right after that compactor. So that would be your drivable surface in this option. Once it's done curing, it'll be, again, a very hard essentially dirt road. And then the asphalt will be put in place. And again, asphalt will be installed in lifts. This particular design, the asphalt thickness, I think it's going to be a little bit less. So they might be able to get it done in 2 lifts. But worst case scenarios, it's going to be 3 lifts again. Impact on the neighborhood. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is going to be a noisy, dusty, very inconvenient thing.
Sounds like it.
Yes.
Right.
Like I said, I just want to put that expectation out there that this, you know, I mean, I've done this 4 or 5 times now. There'll be vibrations when they remove concrete pavement. That excavator that was in that picture had a bucket on it, but typically they'll put a breaker on that, and it's a giant jackhammer, and they'll break up the pavement. So you know you will feel vibrations. It'll be loud. So I just want to get that out there that that yes, we are well aware that it is very noisy. It is very dusty sometimes, and it is very inconvenient. And the way we try and combat that is we try and just keep our heads down and get through it. You know, let's try and get this project done as quick as we can. That way you guys can get back to normal life. One of the questions that Pam submitted to me was, when will my house be affected, for how long? That is not an easy question to answer, given the reason that there is no way for me to guess what a contractor is going to do as far as how he's going to tackle this project. And so the way we handle it is we require that the contractor submit to us his phasing plan, traffic control plan. And part of that plan is, a requirement of that plan is for him to designate what we call a homeowner liaison. That liaison is responsible for coordinating with you guys on a day-to-day basis. So typically what's done is knocks on the door, maybe puts a postcard in your mailbox and says, you know, I need you guys to park over there. I'm going to be working from here to here. Again, we kind of do this because, you know, I can make a 5-page plan of the different stages, but a contractor might say, well, that's not really efficient for my operation because I can put 20 guys on this project. But another contractor might say, well, I'm going to do it in smaller chunks, so I'm going to have 5 guys. So that's why we don't really make the plan. We let the contractor who knows his crews, knows his abilities, to submit the plan to us. To answer your previous question, yes, there is a large issue with this section. Obviously, if you live south in this area, when we're building this, you're going to wonder how you're going to get out. So a requirement of the project is that this section will have at least 1 lane open at all times. Again, that's kind of for your guys' convenience, but also in case there's emergencies and stuff like that. So that is how we're going to try and handle that situation.
So for those who may not be able to read the writing in the back, that says leave 1 lane open on El Chaparral between Sonora and El Dorado for egress.
And that would be a part of the contract, no
Correct.
alternatives. The contractor would have to do that,
Yes.
for emergencies.
Yes.
So they can do it.
The caveat to that is that there might be times that there is a truck right there and you might have to wait like 2 minutes while he moves. But there shouldn't be, you know, you come home, huge hole, and I live over there type of situation. The county has a lot of these small no parking signs that we sometimes deploy on these projects, and basically the sign has reference to an ordinance that gives us the authority to tow people that might have a vehicle that's been left and we can't find the owner. And so to kind of keep things moving, we put these signs out that say, you know, no on-street parking Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Again, some contractors will put in 4 12-hour days, so they might actually try and follow this 7 to 6 p.m. Some might, you know, say, well, I know that there's going to be a lot of traffic on me at 5, so I'm like to get out of here by 5. So again, these signs, you know, you need to pay attention to them. However, again, the person to follow instructions will be the actual contractor. Our on-site inspector might also get involved, but really the contractor is kind of in charge of his work site, and so he kind of he'll have the control and hopefully the wherewithal to tell you where all you can park and where it might not be too good of an idea to park. Like I mentioned before, the goal is to have a drivable surface at the end of the day. And like I mentioned before, weather can affect this. I put it in the contract that drivable surface can only be in place for a max of 10 working days. A working day is Monday through Friday, and a day that isn't, I think the technical term is a day of which they can work 6 hours unimpeded due to weather. And so once that drivable surface, whether it be the stabilized subgrade or the reinforced rock base, should only be in place a max of 10 days. It should be less than that before the first lift of asphalt is down. We like to get that first lift of asphalt down as quick as we can, mainly to keep water from getting into the underlying soil, the rock base. Once water gets in there, it can start losing a little bit of its strength. So we push real hard to get that first lift on. Direct driveway access might not be available until the second lift. That second lift, or the final lift, is typically 2 inches to 1.5 inches. So there'll still be a little lip right there in front of the driveway. Direct driveway access. There's been projects in the past that we've kind of put in some language about driveway access, but it really turned into a thing where the contractor would say, I spend half the day putting them in just to turn around the next day and spend half the day to take them out. So we kind of let him decide, again, how he wants to work that. Most of our contractors have been really good at accommodating people. We've had projects where people with special needs are in the project area and they get accommodated. But generally speaking, we try and, again, just try and get this done and get people back to normal as fast as we can. One thing I'll mention is that there is a possibility that a contractor might try to deploy 2 crews to get this project done faster. This is something that I think we will suggest, but it's not a requirement. So the way that would work is that there would be 2 demolition teams, one starting here and working on the south bulb, and then probably one starting at Sonora Court and working on the side streets. And then those 2 operations will probably get done pretty close to one another, and then it would just be El Chaparral to try and work our way out. Again, this is it's not a requirement, but there are some contractors out there that their business model is speed, and so they might do the math and say it's better for us to do this. Widespread driveway replacement is out of the scope of this project. there will be curb and gutter repairs in front of driveways like this. So we try and be as careful as we can to get that repair done. You know, walking through the neighborhood, I do know that there's driveways out there that are not in great shape. So even working near them might cause a problem. So if a contractor does do some damage, we will repair that. But I just want to put it out there that our repair will probably be as minimal as we can, but as logical as we can. So what I mean by that is, concrete has joints in it. So, it makes sense to try and take it to the closest joint. But if your closest joint is 10 feet away, we're not going to replace 10 feet of driveway just to get to a joint. We'll probably, cut back maybe 3 feet or something. Like I said, our main goal is to leave stuff in the condition it's presently in. We usually go around, take pictures of every driveway, just so if there's some disagreement, we at least have some record that says, well, you might think that crack is new, but we took this picture a week ago and it was there, and we weren't here yet. So just something to keep in mind. Landscaped area and public right-of-way. Landscaped areas can be disturbed. If they are disturbed, we have it in the contract that the contractor is to restore those areas with like materials. So in this instance, there's a mailbox right here, and if you had a flower box or something around this mailbox and you had nice brick pavers and whatever, the contractor might take those, set them aside, do this work, and then he's supposed to put those back and remulch. Now, one thing I will say is individual plants, trees, bushes, probably something that we won't mess with or won't replace. So I have it in the contract that the contractor, if he comes across things like that, he should knock on the door and let you guys at least give you the chance to dig them up, transplant them, do whatever you see fit. The other thing is trees. This is another good picture where you can kind of see this concrete truck and these tree limbs. Dump trucks are pretty bad at catching branches. Once they raise that bucket, they're already a tall vehicle, so now they're twice as tall. So if we need to trim trees, we will. Again, we'll try and do that in a clean manner as we can, and as little as we can. But the place that we typically stop is right-of-way line. Public right-of-way is roughly 10 feet from back curb. And the other thing I'll mention is on these curb and gutters, about a foot behind the back of curb will get disturbed. It's part of the contract to fill that back in, reseed it, and the contractor, the project's under a 1-year warranty. So, if we're doing this in mid-July, obviously that's not the best time for grass to grow. They try and do the best they can, but we stay on top of them to say, hey, we're still having issues with that grass. Again, we try and restore it to the best of our ability. Project timeline. Like I mentioned before, project is under design right now. Anticipated bid time is late fall to early winter of this year.
Wow.
Anticipated construction start date, we're giving the contractor a window, basically saying you can start as early as May 13th of 2019 or as late as June 3rd. Something different that we're going to try with this project is the bidders will submit their own timeline. Typically on projects, we say, we want you to reconstruct the street from A to B. You have 40 weeks. And you know, if you go over your 40-week mark, you get charged what we call liquidated damages, which is, we set that different for different projects. Sometimes it's $500 a day, sometimes it's $1,000 a day. But on this project, since it's so large and we have the two options, it's hard to really gauge, you know, what sort of contractors will bid this project. We might even get some larger out-of-town contractors. And so we thought the best thing to do is not say, okay, you know, you have 35 weeks. We said, how about you tell us how much it's going to cost and how quickly you can do it. And so we're going to evaluate the bids on a dollar per day type of situation. That way, like I mentioned before with the two crew situation, if we have someone that says, hey, we can get this done in 20 weeks, or roughly one season, I think that's good news for you guys, that's good news for us, but is that $1 million more than someone who's going to do it in 40 weeks? I can't answer that. They can answer that, and they will answer that when they submit their bids. So again, but one thing I will mention is we will set a maximum day. We haven't quite decided on that. So, you know, the language will be something like submit your own contract time not to exceed 200 working days. So if it's 200 working days, that is more than one season. So typically asphalt plants around here will close for the season around the 1st of November. You can't lay asphalt when it gets too cold. So we've set in the contract that work will cease November 1st, and the work will be taken to a finished state. So that means that, let's say we were going to do this project in smaller increments that spanned in multiple years. You know, we would stop and, you know, like at an intersection or somewhere that kind of made sense. So that's kind of a requirement that, you know, the contractor needs to pay attention to what he's doing and not just say, oh, it's November 1st, I'm gone. He will leave it in a finished state, and basically no work will happen through the winter. And then work will start back up again in May of 2020. And hopefully it will be done by the end of that season. And again, that's where the maximum days come into effect. So, you know, we could get a contractor that is going to say, I'm going to go ahead and put my contract time at the max you gave. Well, if he starts running over that max, liquidated damages are going to kick in. And for this particular project, since the contractors are picking their own time to dissuade someone from being like, oh, I can get it done in 3 weeks. You know, that's a guaranteed job for me. Well, we're going to jack up the liquidated damages pretty high. So hopefully, you know, to kind of keep them a little bit honest on that.
Yeah, Lauren Slott, will you allow them, the way the RFP is written, to submit for one contractor 2 proposals? In other words, I can get it done in 18 weeks and it'll be this, or I can get it done in 2 seasons, you know, and it'll be this. Will you write it such that they can give you both options for one contractor?
Well, it's interesting because, you know, basically contractors can be prime contractors, subcontractors. Right. I mean, we've had bids where someone like, I'll just say Capital Asphalt, said, well, I'm going to be the prime and I'm going to sub out my concrete work to X person. And then another contractor said, well, I'm going to be prime and my sub is going to be capital. And so, I probably wouldn't see any problems with multiple options. I mean, the more options, in my opinion, the better.
Right. I just wanted to make sure you weren't going to make an RFP or RFQ that would restrict them from submitting an alternative proposal to their.
All of our there is language that all of our proposals can go through what's called a value engineer proposal. And so the way that works is that they would have to submit a bid and win the bid with our design, but they can't say, hey, you have 8 inches of asphalt. If I maybe, make that rock base a little bit deeper and shrink that layer of asphalt, I can save, $300,000 on this project. Will you accept that proposal? And we would evaluate it and say, yes, we'll accept that proposal. And then they end up getting half of the difference of whatever the difference between the bid and what they proposed. So, yeah, there's language that they can propose many things, even if we didn't do these 2 options. All right, and these are prepared questions that Pam submitted to me. What are the color flags and striping through the neighborhood? In preparation for next year's road rehab, we evaluated the stormwater situation, and we discovered that there's a couple crossroad pipes that are in bad condition. So our surveyor's been in the neighborhood collecting survey data, and I'm hoping to squeeze a project out this year to replace those stormwater inlets and pipes. There's 4 locations. One is next to Pam's house, and one is on El Dorado, kind of that north curve, and then the other is just north of the southern cul-de-sac of Pecos, and then the other one is on Sonora. How will development of vineyards and Vineyards Park be addressed by rehab project? Vineyards and Vineyards Park is in the city limits. Really, the county has no jurisdiction over that development. We have copies of the plans of that development. And it's my understanding that at some point in time there will be a connection made at El Dorado that will connect up to the vineyards. I have no timeline of when that will be. That could be a couple years from now. That plan could get scrapped and they might do something different. I don't really know. So it's really nothing that affects this project in any major way. So what can be done about low number of fire hydrants? I've reached out to Public Water Supply District number 9 that supplies your guys' water. Our subdivision regulations specify a minimum spacing of 500 feet on subdivisions. This subdivision was built before these regulations were in place, so the water district sent me a map of their fire hydrants, and yes, there's areas that don't meet this 500-foot requirement. And so basically what the district has told me is that they can install additional hydrants, but they're looking for someone to pay for them. So I think you as an HOA would probably...
Not an HOA, no, 501c3, we got no HOA here. Yeah, just saying. Dues, $15 a year, optional. Just want to clarify, before there's mass hysteria.
Okay. Basically, they would look for someone to pay for them. Again, from what the district has told me, the hydrants are in place now. I'm not quite sure how they got paid for. I don't know if they're funded through the fire district, but that's something that the county probably won't get involved in. Will a traffic study be done for this project? Short answer, no. Basically, like I mentioned before, rehab project, we have a street that's failing and continue to fail, we need to start from scratch. So, you know, does the value of knowing that 2,000 cars a day go past Casey's or on the lower part of El Chaparral doesn't really affect the design or really what we're going to do with this project very much. Will stop bars be panned at stop signs? Our traffic safety manual does indicate that if a location has seen has a history of people not obeying the stop sign, that a stop bar might be considered. I'll emphasize the might, because kind of from our standpoint, if you're not obeying a sign, a white paint marker might not persuade you either. And that's something that we, you know, every year we try and keep up on our painting and our striping. So again, it's something that we have to have crews deployed out here to paint them. But I will say that looking through the neighborhood, you know, on El Chaparral, I could see some sense in it. On some of these other intersections, I don't see much use in it. And really, quite frankly, there's some intersections I don't even know really the history of why they have stop signs.
They don't stop, so.
I say take them down.
So will the construction, you know, the speed limit is 20 miles an hour.
Right.
Will the construction people have to abide by that? And so if we call the sheriff and say they're roaring down like the sewer trucks used to, they can get ticketed?
I don't see why not.
I was thinking it might slow people down. Question there?
Is there anyone looking into how we get out of El Chaparral onto WW? Are they gonna have a stop sign or a roundabout or?
That is an entirely separate group.
Yeah.
Yes, that is working with
Yeah, the state.
MoDOT, with our city council members, and with our Boone County representative who sits on the council.
WW is a state highway. That's why MoDOT. WW is state.
We had a presentation from those folks 6 months ago, and they said it would require money from all three of those sources. So that's an ongoing discussion with them. What?
You were talking about the 4 drains that were, and I don't think one of those was at that dip on El Chaparral. That area doesn't take hardly any rain to get this much water over the road. Now, how much of that is a clogged drain versus something that needs to be replaced, I don't know. But if you're not going to fix that in this project and you're going to have pavement instead of concrete, you're going to wash that road out there. Just so you know, I don't know if you've been out here after a rain, but that area doesn't take hardly any rain to flood. Almost enough that you worry. I've seen 4 or 5 times probably in the last 2 years that you worry about should you drive your car through it.
I live on it, I see it all the time when it rains.
So I think you need to look at that drain as a part of this project if you haven't, and put it in your bid to fix whatever the problem is there.
I would say there's a couple things. That dip does have graded inlets. In my opinion, graded inlets they clog easy, and that's kind of why we typically when we're replacing inlets, we go with what we call the Type M, or modified Type M's, which are kind of the more curve opening ones. The issue with those graded inlets down at the dip is that they are a box that sit right on top of those pipes that go under the road. So to take them out, we would have to patch that pipe, and then we would have to either try and shift the low point of that road somewhere, uphill, either way, and then those inlets would have to probably have their own separate pipes down to the creek. I don't know if does anyone here that lives basically in that house that's on the east side?
I live right where that dip is, and there's always shit coming out whenever it rains.
You live on the west side, probably.
So those 2 or 3 houses right there, the one on the, is it a yellow house? I'm not sure. Yellow house on the east side, their driveway almost looks pretty level with the road as it is. So to move that elevation, that's going to be tricky.
What about increasing the size of the grate that goes down in there?
Again, the problem with graded inlets is that once they clog kind of on their perimeter, then that water basically just tries to bypass it completely. The only way to get it over that is to have the water rise and come in. Which, again, if the water's slowing down, carrying debris, that's also going to kind of pile up. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a difficult area, no doubt. But that's
It's not gonna be big.
probably not.
I got a question. I know a lot of the concrete's been out here since the early 70s, and there's been replacements done off and on. One of the reasons it breaks up is because we have the clay underneath, hard pan soil, and when water.
We can't hear back.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Don.
Sorry, I got a big mouth here. What do you do? Push the little button?
No, don't push anything, just talking to it. The battery falls off, you do that.
Okay, so what I've noticed is, and this is, and you see it all the time, is water hydrostatic pressure pushes up through those cracks in the concrete in numerous locations. Has anything in the design been addressed to keep the water from percolating up through this asphalt? Because asphalt's a much softer material than concrete. I guess my concern is, what's the life expectancy of the asphalt versus what we've had for many years out here? Due to the subsurface conditions, and I don't think you couldn't drain enough of it to get it away. I mean, that's just my opinion, but.
Right. So I kind of think that there'll probably still be a little bit of percolation. As far as why we're not going back with concrete, to be completely honest with you, we've been seeing some issues with the concrete as a material lately. We've tried to figure it out over the past couple of years. Why is our concrete deteriorating quicker than advertised? And I think there's some chemistries there that we don't have a good grasp on. And of course, you ask 5 different people, and you get 5 different answers. Oh, it's freeze thaw, you guys, or oh, it's contractor put in wrong. So as far as do we think the asphalt's going to last longer than a concrete street would? I think from our perspective, you maintain them differently, and so our asphalt maintenance plan, our pavement preservation plan, is pretty robust. And when it comes to asphalt, there's just so much more options to repair or to preserve it. With concrete, it's pretty much, when it breaks, and you have to replace it. With asphalt, once the project's done, then it basically gets kicked into our preservation program, which is basically run on a time schedule. So by year 2, you'll get a fog seal to help replenish oils that get lost through oxidation. And then maybe in 7 years, if the condition warrants, then it might get a chip seal or some sort of preservation seal on top of that. And then of course, longer down the road, it might get milled and overlaid. So as far as longevity of the pavement, we feel like asphalt is kind of the better way to go. And yeah, I would say for those that still want to question concrete, there's definitely some subdivisions. Actually, before I came, I drove through Columbia Gorge, and
Yeah, I was gonna say, that concrete over there is breaking up really bad. And of course, they've had a lot of heavy traffic on it with, the construction, I understand that. I just wanna make sure, because I mean, a lot of places, with the concrete, you see the highway department, they go over the existing concrete, they repair, where the spalling and breaking is. But I understand from your visual, that there's a lot more patching to do that than would be necessary. Because I know in the back part of the subdivision where you guys are not working, if I remember right, they just went over the existing concrete back there with an asphalt overlayment.
yeah, so yeah, there's definitely concrete streets that we've overlaid, and the decision on that is, we think, water is always your enemy. So some of these that we feel like through our experience of the last 5 to 8 years, we start really seeing the early warning signs. So we say, let's overlay that now before we get into rehab territory. So we might mill and overlay a subdivision like that so we can seal it up. But the problem with engineering and some of the decisions we have to make are, these are long. I mean, some of these decisions I'm making now, I might not see the results until I retire, which seems crazy. But and of course, someone could easily say 8 years from now, you guys made the wrong decision 8 years ago.
I do worry with asphalt, and I know concrete's not cheap to repair, and I know it's more expensive to put in initially, for sure. But long term, I can see this asphalt needing complete repair. If we have hot summers at 105 degrees, asphalt doesn't hold up well in the heat. If there's any kind of traffic like trash trucks and stuff on it, it'll just melt out ruts. And I do worry about that after the first couple of years. And will the county, when you're trying to be on a fixed schedule, not only be able to get crews to do it, but be able to afford to do it? So that's more my fear with asphalt than concrete. Is, yeah, it'll save you money for the first 2 or 3 years, but will you be virtually having to, every 2 or 3 years after that, completely pave on top of it or seal it completely again because of that hot summer temperature?
Yeah, I mean, yes, asphalt is essentially gravel that's glued together with oil. And so it loses its stiffness with increased temperature. That is true. There is a lot of science to how it deforms, how it behaves. Yes, you can go around town and see examples of traffic has rutted it, like you said, but then there's also a lot. I think we have somewhere around like 200 miles of asphalt that the county maintains, and a lot of our maintenance crew maintains a lot of that. They're good at doing panel replacements, but they're also good at maintaining asphalt. So like I said, the good thing about a preservation plan is that it is a plan. We're not whack-a-mole problems. And when you're whack-a-mole problems, that's how you can really get into budget problems. Because you're trying to basically just say, let's not touch anything until it fails. And the preservation idea is that you incrementally make these maintenance treatments, and you prolong that life. So it's just like your house. If you have a wood-sided house, which I'm sure you would get some people that say wood siding beats vinyl, hands down. You just have to keep painting.
Oh, if you maintain it, yeah.
And caulk it, paint it, keep the water out, and it'll last you 80 years. And vinyl, it'll oxidize, it'll lose its color, it'll do all these things. And so the same is true for pavement. So that's why you can get fans, just like with a house, you can get fans in both corners. I think from our experience, our pavement preservation, we have an engineer that is our pavement preservation engineer. So his sole job is to keep this system functioning. He looks at the schedule. He goes out and inspects, because that's the other thing. It's on a time thing, but he also physically goes out and inspects and says, even though the timetable says it's due for an overlay, we have this subdivision over here that's in a bigger need. So there's still kind of that need to see what's going on.
Question?
Yes, my question is, if we plan to replace our driveway anyway, would you recommend doing it now or do it after the project here?
So what I've recommended to people in the past is that we are going to have a concrete contractor or contractor on site to do the project. So what I sometimes tell people is you might want to talk to them first, because their crew is going to be right there. It might be beneficial for them to just say, let's go ahead and do your driveway while we're here. Now, what I will say is that agreement between you and that contractor has nothing to do with the county. So, if they do a bad job or you're not satisfied, please don't call me. Because that's going to be between, you two as a party.
Okay.
But, I'm also not telling you that you have to do that.
But
You're free to use whoever you
Well,
want.
sure, but would it be better to do it before the curb and gutter thing goes in and the asphalt, or wait till after that's done?
I would wait.
You would, okay. And then a question, one more. That subdivision out off of New Haven Road, as you're going east, it's on the left. It's a nice subdivision. What's it called?
Woodlands.
Woodlands. Did you guys do that asphalt out there?
Yes, I believe we did.
And has that held up well?
I've driven it, looks pretty good.
It looks.
Ride's nice.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
So, is that asphalt alternative you're talking about, is that the same that went into Rosetta, Santa Ana, and Santa Barbara, and how is that holding up? Is it the same design?
Rosetta and Santa Ana, I believe, is an overlay of an existing concrete street.
Okay, so you did not replace?
No.
It was the overlay?
Yes,
Okay.
but as far as I know, I think it's holding up pretty well. I think it got what we call fog seal this year. So again, the purpose of that fog seal, a little background on asphalt, is the sun cooks it and oxidizes it, so it turns white. When oxidized, it becomes a little bit more brittle, and brittleness is the enemy of asphalt. More brittle, more cracks, more water, more problems. So some of those fog seals or rejuvenator helps put that oil back in to keep it flexible.
Go ahead.
If it's working for Rosetta and the streets behind the school, why wouldn't the overlay work for the rest of the subdivision, and it would be a much shorter project and not with much tear up?
Because I don't remember off the top of my head when that got overlaid, but I think it probably got done a little sooner as far as the concrete pavement life. And so it's really a matter of timing. And like someone mentioned, really any road or most roads, the problem is under the pavement.
They didn't have a lot of damage. They didn't have a lot of damage like we do.
And so, yeah, there's soft, wet soils under the road. There's no base rock under the current road out here. The only place there is where we patched.
I don't need that.
Oh, go ahead.
My question is on, if we're gonna be going like a foot or so off the curbs, the few of us that have fences, have been there at the curb forever. What's the plans for there? Because it looks like they're probably gonna need to be moved.
What type of fence do you
This
have?
is chain link now.
Chain link.
I've been actually thinking about doing some work.
Are you off the
He's on a
Foot.
Basically, they need enough room to get that back
Yeah.
form in. If my memory serves me right, there's not a lot, there might be one or two patches on the north side of Reynosa. So I would say, as long as it's not right at a post, we might be able to kind of work with it. If it's at a post, it might be a bit more
It's
problem.
not the best fence anyway. I mean, we were kind of, they were kind of talking about redoing it, but we didn't want to redo it and then put it where it's going to be moved again, so.
Right, and I would say, technically speaking, it's probably in violation by being inside public right of way. But we're not, we maintain the public right of way, and we try and address issues when they're a problem, but we're not right of way police. So, actually, before we get to one more question, I actually have one more question. And I thought this would probably spark the most debate and questions. What can be done about speeders besides call the sheriff's department? Sadly, or I don't know about sadly, but the sheriff's department is the enforcer of traffic laws. So they are the best people to call when it comes to traffic violations. We refrain from installing engineered traffic calming, basically because over time we feel that there's a decrease in the effectiveness, there's a decrease in its popularity, and there's an increase in maintenance costs. So traffic calming is kind of, from our standpoint, trading one problem for another. So if you really look at traffic calming and what it's trying to do, you're basically forcing discomfort onto a driver. So, so if it's a speed bump or a speed hump, you're throwing an obstacle out there for a driver to force them to slow down, or you're going to hit this and you're going to maybe damage your car or something. Other traffic calming measures are adding texture to the pavement, or what's that?
Chicanes? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Or narrowing the road. There's actually some subdivisions that I've seen where they refuse to put in any straight roads. That all roads are curvy, because that way you have to pay attention when you. So again, to me, that's you're trading a speeding problem for, okay, now it's icy and now I have to navigate this turny road and I hate it. And then it messes with people's property lines, it messes with rut. So that's why we kind of refrain from traffic calming as a measure like that.
I'm Irene Diagula, and my question is, we just bought this house a year ago, it was built like 72 or something. But like as your little curb comes up, I have this really nice brick mailbox creature. So if you all come up, will they just knock down my brick mailbox?
Do you live on
Victoria Court?
Yeah.
You saw my pretty guy?
I did.
Is he going to still be there?
I'm hopefully going to stop short.
Yay.
So yeah. Luckily, I think I think you did have a little bit of damage there to the side. So I'm going to try and address that. But yeah, I saw your mailbox and I'm trying to avoid it.
Thank you.
What about, you were talking about slowing people down, what about the sign that gets your speed as you come up and says you're going, so that people would realize they're going over
That,
that?
we do get that from the Boone County Sheriff's Department, and we are on the rotating list. So
Okay.
I think they have two, but it's by request of where they're placed. So we have asked just every time it's deployed out here, just to put us right back on the bottom of the list, so we come right back up automatically.
Yeah, I mean, by no means are the problems of this neighborhood unique. I mean, I lived over just south of Cherry Hill, next to Grant, and that I'd walk my dog and I could just, I could hear that people were going too fast. And of course, for me, it was more of an annoyance because I'm on a sidewalk. I feel pretty protected. I understand out here with no sidewalks, you feel pretty vulnerable. And so I understand that concern. But again, when it comes to speed humps, speed bumps, research shows that you try and solve a problem, and people either slow down initially for that bump, and then they actually go faster than they did previously because they feel like, oh, I'm losing time. People are slowing me down. So that's why we typically refrain from it.
Let him go, yes. Jeff, a question on the driveways and the curbs. We have the rollback curbs out here, and some of the driveways do go into that rollback curb. If you have to take that rollback curb out in front of the driveway, then will that rollback curb go back in front of that driveway so you have the nice big hump, or will you blend it in?
We'll blend it in.
Very good.
So, you guys will make that since well.
Yeah, we have to.
So when the time comes, how will they mitigate when people are parking in the streets that currently already park there anyway, but have more cars that can't park in their driveway, and they have all the asphalt trucks and all this stuff going? Who will help mitigate all those other cars in the street for parking wise? Does that make sense? Because we have more cars at our house that'll have to be parked out somewhere in a street for however long we can't get in and out of our driveway.
Right. So again, the liaison for the contractor should direct you to help you out.
Okay, we're gonna need to wrap this up, and Lawrence has another question. Are there other questions from the group that you want to get in? We've already kept Micah past his 7:15 time, so. Oh, there's his phone number if you put it up, just saying, and his email.
I'll just make a quick comment. You aren't going to fix the problem with the sheriff department speed bumps or anything, and the sheriff department's very inconsistent. The first person they stop, they may give a ticket to, and the next three they don't. It's more unfair. That's just a comment. My question was, is there scientific evidence with this kind of clay substrate that we will have underneath this anyway, that one or the other method is likely to last longer?
Scientific is, I don't know if I'd say scientific, because one thing I
Science
didn't,
is what you want to make it, right?
it's definitely starting to be that way. But one thing I forgot to mention on the subgrade stabilization option. One thing we are considering trying is a polymer additive into the mixed water. The polymer essentially does two things. It helps seal out water and seal in water. And so the idea with that is once it gets mixed in and we compact that mixture, it's going to help keep water in, so there's water there to hydrate that lime kiln dust. When that lime kiln dust activates, it gets stronger. And so once it, as time progresses, that base should be getting stronger and stronger. However, I will say that is how it's supposed to work, and we've tested it, and we've gotten some decent strengths. So it appears that it is working like it's supposed to, but I would say a lot of people would say that's what it's advertised to do. Is that what it's actually going to do? This product has a pretty long history that I researched before I decided to go ahead and try and test it. And there's a county down in Florida that has used this product over several hundred miles of their roads. And there's pictures of when they've stabilized the subgrade, and then they've had torrential downpours, and they've gone back and the stabilized layer has bridged a washout. And so, to me, that's like, well, that's impressive. Sometimes concrete pavement won't even do that. But again, it's nothing that, you know, we haven't tried it yet here. So to say scientific evidence, that's why I say, well, there's evidence over here and over there and over there, and I've even talked to some more local contractors that one is over in Washington, Missouri, and he was a reference that the company gave me, and I called him. He's like, "This works great for me every time I've used it." So it's kind of, you know, you kind of have to put faith in something and try it out, and hopefully it'll.
A couple of brief follow-up questions from me for our neighbors. We have a lot of people out here who work second shift.
Yes.
So in terms of hours of sleeping and all of that, you had said you thought that the no parking signs were 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Would that be usually the extent of noise and vibration?
Yes.
Okay. And given your start time of like May 13th, how would this affect our school bus route pickup for kids and how far they might have to walk with large equipment around and all of that?
So basically, when we do a project, we send out press releases, and as part of that press release, utilities get notified, and the school bus gets notified. Communications gets notified. So we try and keep everyone in the loop. Now, what those individual agencies do with that information, as far as, yeah, we might want to pick your children up at this intersection versus that one because that intersection is under construction.
Follow up with the school district, is what or the school bus company. And you said, in terms of the bids and the timeline for bids being late fall, early winter, is that something that you can inform the neighborhood association about? Because usually I know that comes before the Boone County Commission at some point, and so for those of us who are really into the details of this, could you notify us of those hearings so that we can sit in and get more informed about it?
So the good thing about you guys having a organization is that obviously that makes information exchange a lot easier. So yeah, I'm sure you and I will be best friends for the next year.
Woohoo! Okay, great.
And probably just as a comment, you guys, probably a good place to get information, especially once the project gets started. If you're not on Nextdoor, which is an app, and I know I can send anybody I need to an invite with your email address, 60 seconds. That's probably going to be a really good way for people in the neighborhood to be up to date to say, hey, I live on Sonora Drive, they're doing our street today. Something like that, or they told us they're going to be on our street in a couple of days. That might give people an idea to kind of track the progress through the neighborhood, or just to be more informed about it too.
Yep, and for any of you who don't know what Nextdoor is, we have some flyers, they're back there on the table, you can take it.
Yeah, so it would be my hope that that one of the requirements I put into the contract is that I want their phasing plan as soon as possible. I want their traffic control plan as soon as possible. Basically, just to if there's any issues, we can work through it before they're like, here's my plan. It's Thursday. I'm starting Monday. And then hopefully when we have a phasing plan, I don't see why that can't be shared with you guys, so you get a little bit better idea that now we have a contractor. You know who they are. Hopefully by then they've already established that Steve is the liaison.
I assume that phasing plan would include start dates and stop dates. Or is it going to be kind of a window?
The way I have it written is they're supposed to provide areas affected, a timeline, and all what they're doing. So like I said, the project kind of gets done in phases. So they might be affecting your house with a curb and gutter repair Tuesday, and then they might move on that operation, or they might say, okay, it's time to remove pavement and add rock. And so you might be affected a Tuesday and then nothing for a couple days, and so again, that's where the liaison should hopefully step up and kind of keep that all
Quick question. How is this financed?
Your tax dollars at work.
Okay, we're not gonna be assessed anything extra on our property taxes.
Correct.
Fantastic.
You would have knew that by now.
All right.
All right, our time is almost up for the entire meeting, so let's give Micah a big hand. Thank you. And we will be seeing lots more of Micah, as well as all of his liaisons and other folks out here. So.